Have you found a passion? Something that gets you out of bed and gets you going each day? Have you done something because it's your idea and nobody else's? Are you seeking mastery of something? Even though you may never become a master, you may want to be one. And finally, are you curious? These are the things that motivate human beings. And my job as a professional coach is to see how you work. So this lecture is on your most favorite thing in the world. Or not. You. There is a problem with the human brain. It takes in so much information per second. It takes in 2 or 3 million bits of information per second. But unfortunately, it can only deal with about 150 bits per second. So you can see the problem. You've got a lot of information coming your way, but you can't pay attention to all of it. And what do mostly? You ignore it. You have many senses that you don't pay attention to all the time. We're going to be fighting your glycemic index in a few minutes as your hormones change, right? Yep. But also how you feel, how you move, how biology affects you, but how your brain emphasizes information is important. So this is a psychological thing called the rule of 3. And it's very simple. You need 3 points of information or 3 pieces of data to know where you're at. We call that triangulation. But the problem is you can only pay attention to 3 things at a time. And mostly you can't do that at the same time. So when we're working on something, we need to know where we're going. What are the information that's important, but what do we pay attention to? Now I know you've asked this question, as we all have. Why am I not a better shooter sometimes? It hurts, I know. Sometimes you don't perform as well as you want to. But it's a bit of the problem for the brain to do this. So you have to learn to do something very spectacular. Number 1, you have to learn to stand up straight. Now this is a physical and mental posture, all right? How many of you have good posture? Yeah, I know, it's tough, right? But your mom was right. You should stand up straight, because when you stand up straight, your brain stands up straight too and tends to pay attention, all right? Whoever has good posture tends to face the target. And we're not just talking about shootings, we're talking about the goal, all right? People who have better posture are promoted more often. We relate to people that have a sense of presence and command about them, right? When you grip a firearm, you do it with your whole body. Now, how many of you felt like maybe your grip isn't sufficient for the task occasionally, right? So I want you to start thinking about the whole body gripping the gun. Not just your hands, but you're gripping the ground with your feet, your posture relative to the task. You're using muscles on the back of the arms. You're using the rotator cuff. Everything you do is the whole body relating to the grip. It's not the hands to the pistol. Right? You have to stabilize your shoulders and your core. When you stabilize your shoulders and your core, what happens is you keep your arms in the right position. So how many of you are shooting a dot? That pesky thing moves a lot, doesn't it? But dots don't move without you, so it really moves a lot. You do, right? So how are you going to stabilize that? You're going to use the back of your shoulders to do it, but we're going to stand up straight to the task. But oftentimes when we don't feel confident, how do we stand? Yeah, and what's the phone really teaching us to do? Keep our heads down. The next thing you have to do in shooting, and this is the inner game of shooting, is how do my sights and trigger relate to each other? All right? When you're a beginner, we teach them individually, correct? You have a sight, you have a trigger, but once you start shooting, can you press the trigger without the sights moving? The sights move no matter what you do when you press the trigger. So what we want to do is manage both together through feel and vision. Back to the rule of 3. You can only focus on 3 things, and 2 of the things you should be focusing on is what you see and what you feel. Lanny Basham, our great Olympic athlete that nobody knows, but can you imagine going to the Olympics and shooting a perfect score? I mean, it's incredible, the amount of pressure upon him. But he said this bit of information, and you ought to remember it too. Remember what good shooting looks like, but more importantly, remember what it feels like. The feel of shooting is just as important as visual. So when we're aiming, we're feeling the trigger, we're seeing the sights. We're feeling our connection to the task. Vision is perception of the movement relative to the target. So when you're shooting, you have to see the sights moving on the target, and you have to see the target. I often ask this question in class, much to my horror. I was like, please don't do it. There's too many people in the room. all right? But how many of you fired a shot without seeing your sights? It happens occasionally, right? Why does it happen? Because it doesn't mean you weren't looking, right? What were you doing? Something else. Your brain was not present for it, all right? So we've really got to see the sights, and we've got to feel the trigger together. And when we have this feeling, it creates a connection to our task. How many of you go on gut instinct sometimes, intuition? All right? It's a big part of this, all right? Together, this creates what's called a feedback loop, which is the most important part of training any human being. Come on. Let's go on to sleep. There we go. So right here in the row, she's taping me right now. Shelley made all these beautiful slides, so give her a big round of applause. Lord knows what they look like if I was in charge there. All right. So being in the process, we often call it follow-through, which is an archery term. And one of the problems with follow-through is it says it ends. You follow through and the task is over. What we find with high-level competitors is they stay in the process continuously. All right? And in order to stay in the process, you have to be present. But boy, that's hard, isn't it? All right? How many of you have driven home at night and not remember doing the driving? Yeah. Scary, right? It's super scary. So we've got to be present. How do we become process fixated instead of outcome driven? Because most of you are outcome driven when I teach you. And that means you do what? You look at the target and you say, I'm a good person or I'm a bad person. All right? I didn't get what I wanted. But the real key to knowing this is being in the process, always to be present. There's a great quote. There are two kingdoms you cannot enter. One is the past and one is the future, but that's where most people live. When you're worried about the past, it sounds like this. Boy, don't screw this up again. And when you're worried about the future, is like, I hope I don't screw this up. The problem for human beings is when you do one of those two things, what do you visualize? The very thing you don't want. The very thing you don't want. And it's one of the hardest modulations for me as a coach to keep present for people. Context driven is this: how much information do I need to make an accurate decision? And how much time do I have to make an efficient decision? All right? No matter what decision you make, it comes down, do I have enough information relative to the task? Do I have enough time to do it? How many of you are perfectionists? I got a little bit of that myself, right?
Yeah.
But perfectionism is procrastination, because it'll never happen. You can't be a perfect human being. You can only be good enough. So I often stress when I'm teaching people to shoot is be good enough. Be present to be good enough. Remember, the enemy of good is perfect. So how much time and how much information do I need? When you're in accuracy mode, you want all the bullets to go through the same hole, right? Is that really a good idea, though? All right. And let me ask you the question: is your pistol capable of it? With the ammo you shoot, with you shooting it? So if it's in the target, what could you simply say to yourself? Good enough. Let it go. Good enough. I've done my job. And if you don't get good enough, what can you say to yourself? I'm learning. There is no failure. In fact, failure is a necessary component for people to get better. It's the only way you can get better, is you have to make mistakes. All right? So when we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about tension. How many of you have a lot of tension in your life? Yeah, right? I just talked to somebody, she's like, my neck's killing me. I was like, I know, right? It goes up there, and you hold the whole world on your shoulders, and everything's going to be good. But efficiency says minimum effort, maximum effect. But your coaches messed you up, so did your teachers. And they said what? Give 110%. But you can't do that. Why not? Statistically impossible is the first rebel. You'd have a pair of shoes with your feet in it next to you, which would be weird. How many of you ever done something at 100% before though? Is it a good idea? You know, I like to think I'm a race car driver. I'm not, all right? But I don't drive at 100%, why not? The consequences would be extraordinarily bad. So where do high-level performers stay at? In the 90% range. And where do most people stay at? In the 80% range. Efficiency says less effort. Here's a great quote. I don't know who did it. I can't attribute it. So wherever you are in the universe, this goes out to you. All right? Tension is the prejudgment of the outcome with a correction you do not need.
Say that again.
Yeah, I know. All right. Tension is the prejudgment of the outcome with a correction you do not need. So when you tense up before you shoot, what are you doing? You're correcting an error that hasn't happened. You're causing the error, and therefore you're getting the very thing that you thought you didn't want. Because the human mind can't take a negative. Don't think about pink elephants. Yeah, you did. All right? So it always comes down into shooting, decisions. Whatever we do in life is what is the risk versus the reward. How many of you are risk takers? Yeah. So look around the room. Look real quick. Keep your hands up. Because you raise your hands fast. That's how we're taking your hands up. It's me. I'll jump off of it. Good. All right? And it's good. We need risk takers, right? Intellectual risk takers, artistic risk takers, interpersonal risk takers, athletic. We need risk takers. They're important, right? But we also need the risk averse. Why? Somebody's got to hold our beer. You got to tell all the other people not to do whatever we just did. It's equally important for human beings to know who they are. We call it the challenge-skill ratio. All right? What is your personality? How much do you need? If you get over-challenged and you're risk-averse, what happens? You check out. But what happens if you're a risk-taker and it's not challenging enough? You disassociate. So we always want to measure whatever we're aiming at. How much effort does it take to hit this target? And it's the risk versus your reward.